white and crisp with flat, solid roofs and deep brown lattice windows. "Stush people else," Grandma Cecile would sniff sometimes when we walked past. Grandma would prefer to live in one of those. Auntie Sophie wants to live as far as possible above the halfway tree clock. Our house is somewhere in the middle. The top half painted seafoam green, the bottom half rust-stained, exposed concrete like the paint just gave up halfway. We have a bathroom so small you have to cotch on the sink to close the door, but at least it's inside with running water, although that's always cold. There are hollow concrete blocks that serve as steps to the front door and a warped, rusty gate that leads into a small front yard covered with gravel and a small backyard covered with crabgrass, with a huge plum tree I used to climb. Tamara's father is a successful mechanic and her mother's a dressmaker like Grandma Cecile, except she has so much work she has 3 girls sewing for her. That's why Tamara lives in one of the better houses on our road. Big and wide with a decent patch of grass in the front and her own room, even though she has a little brother. My mother had to share a room with my grandmother because Auntie Sophie needed her space to study, and my mother was contributing nothing of value to the household. But once I came along, Auntie Sophie was adamant that I share her room so I could also study and learn and be creative, so she could mold me into the person she wanted me to be. Everything around me is noise. My grandmother's radio talk shows in which she is an active participant, arguing aggressively with the hosts and the guests and the people who call in. The yells and the shouts from our neighbours, the dance halls blaring music, the deep growls from the DJs hyping up the crowd almost every night of the week. My mother is rarely at home, but should she grace us with her presence, she plays the TV at top volume as she sits zoned out in front of it. If she's home at night, drunk and vicious after doing God knows what, God knows where, the tension is so loud it presses against my ears. Although, it's the sound of her fists against my skin that is the loudest. The Young and the Restless. Dat woman too conongin. I look up from my seat at the dining table where my head is bent over a schoolbook. I'm in my first year of high school and conjugating French verbs under the watchful eye of Auntie Sophie, who is at the other side of the table reading a magazine. Sophie works at the French embassy and she brings home magazines and comics and lots of cookbooks, which are my favourite because I love to bake, even though our gas stove is so old and weary it slumps to one side in a perpetual state of exhaustion. Sophie is adamant that I learn French, because it is our dream, both of us, to go and live in France. "One day, Pumpkin," she'd say, "I'll be riding through the streets of Paris in a black and white striped shirt, with a baguette sticking out of my bicycle basket, and you'll be perched on the back with your legs sticking out, waving your beret in the wind." And we would descend into a fit of giggles at the idea of it. Because who ever heard of a girl from Potter's Lane making it to Paris, no matter how light the brownness of her skin? "She, that gal there," my mother continues, jutting her chin at the TV. "Conongin!" She's standing in front of the TV, one eye on her soaps, the other on the iron as it glides over a tattered green skirt. It's her one good skirt, the one my grandmother forces her to wear to church. Her muscled arm flexes as she shoves the point of the iron between the pleats. There are heaps of clothes piled behind her on the sofa, a deep burgundy monstrosity of a thing that dominates our tiny living room, wedged up against a low mahogany coffee table and between a seemingly endless array of cabinets filled with knickknacks. Having my mother at home this time of evening, doing something as domestic as ironing no less, is a rare sight. But my grandmother caught her before she could leave the house again, and there was an almighty row. "Is where you going again, Paulette? Why you don't turn your yard, eh?" my grandmother yelled. My mother had muttered that the house was too small for all of us to cotch up in. My grandmother shouted that she should be grateful she has a roof over her head. My mother kissed her teeth. My grandmother smacked her on the side of the head, flung a pile of laundry on the couch, and told her to iron every last one of them before she called down the hand of Jesus to smite her ungrateful daughter right cross-side of the face. And my mother did not have the nerve to disobey. I snort to laugh at the thought of my skinny grandmother as the lion, and my mother, broad-shouldered, veins running like rope down her thick arms as the wildebeest. "You find something funny?" I'm startled to find her eyes on me, and I crawl into myself, bending my head.